Hello everybody and welcome to your Niagara Falls experience. As always, I am Nico, the American.
And I am Peter, the Canadian, eh? And look at my new hat. Blue Jays, American League, eh? But they're Canadian in the American League. So welcome everyone from Canada and back to Nico.
Hey everyone, how are you doing? It's a wonderful day in the neighborhood now, isn't it? Peter, how was your week this far?
It's been busy, actually. Tourism still continues to be hopping down at the falls. We had some beautiful days, and I was on the American side mostly. Canadian side has perked up quite a bit, and a number of new things are opening up all over the place, mostly retail, etc., that's lining the Niagara Parkway, part of the Niagara Parks Commission. So it's happening. This coming weekend is Canada's Victoria Day weekend, our what's called the May 2-4 weekend in Canada. So that's where we celebrate the reign of Queen Victoria. Up until Elizabeth, she was the longest reigning monarch in British history. But Elizabeth surpassed her prior to her passing.
By significant margins.
Yes.
Which is interesting because now they have a new king, and dear Charles. Dear lovely Charles.
Dumbo.
You really don't like him, as a Canadian.
No, I have to tell you that I had a couple of Brits on my tours this week. And as I was talking to them, I did ask about Charles, and most of them wince. Charles is not the beloved character. I think a lot of ties to Diana were part of the bitterness. Many people respect him, and he certainly is not a bad individual. But I think there's an anticipation that when William ascends to the throne, that it's going to take on a much more personable and people-oriented capacity. But right now, Charles is the king, so God save the king.
Righto. And then over here, that means that we are barreling aggressively towards the unofficial start of the summer season and the official start of the tourism season, which is Memorial Day weekend. And oh boy, all indicators are pointing towards a huge return to tourism. We've been talking over the weeks of the fact that tourism really didn't drop off the way it usually does in the winter season. People just sort of stayed. We had an early spring.
I had to monitor, sorry.
A monitor? Yes. We're supposed to monitor the monitor. But who monitors the monitor of the monitor?
Hang on, I have to make a formal apology. Sorry, eh?
There we go. Now we're officially Canadian. But yes, it is the sort of official start of the barreling towards tourism season. And we had an early start to the tourism season. The boat was in the water early. There was no ice on the river at the beginning of April. People are coming. It's a post-COVID world, apparently, and tourists are back in force.
Oh, absolutely.
It is true.
And they love the outdoor side of it, you know. And Niagara Falls, New York, I give them give us the advantage in that is that you move around the park and you're constantly exposed to the power of the falls. So what it means is your outdoor experience is so much more vivid and active, and you're walking and doing things, you know, and that's kind of cool.
Yes, and see, we're being very informative today because we've received two very serious complaints about our last few shows. They've been very, very serious complaints. The first one is with the new passage of the C-11 bill in Canada. Our show has not been focusing enough on the Canadian government. The other issue is that our lack of factual information has been quite upsetting. So combining with that, first of all, we are going back to talking about actual facts, but more importantly, we will be talking more about Canada. And for those of you that are worried that we are not taking things seriously, we have our own Canadian enforcement officer. I present to you the person who has been watching over my shoulder this entire episode, our benevolent benefactor, Darth Mountie.
Well, that's informative. Good to have you, Darth.
Thank you for being here. Our benevolent leader, we'll be sure to talk about as much of Canada as physically possible and be incredibly informative.
Yes. But in fairness, actually kill the music. In fairness, though, we've heard from some local tour guides who are appreciating the information that we're able to impart here or share. One of the things we've created, and you and I were talking about this earlier, Nico, is that we've got a lot of tour guides in this area who are very collegial. I mean, they're friends. They meet when their guests are on Maid of the Mist or other attractions. And there is a severe lack of information available that I think we've kind of stumbled into, not just for tour guides, but for tourists and others. Being able to share information. I understand that Nick and Marty are going to present a rebuttal on the beaver sharks in the near future.
Yes.
But, and there's a whole new thing we've all been learning about. But even on the tried and true, like a little later in the show, we're going to talk about the Erie Canal and its impact on Niagara Falls, or why it exists because of Niagara Falls. So yeah, the tour guides who spoke to me, they're the ones that articulated that they appreciate when we include informative sections, and it's not just, they might say goofing around, but you and I both know it's goofing around.
Goofing around?
Us, yes.
We don't goof around, ever. We are incredibly serious people. I've been instructed that we are legally very serious, very informative people. Especially,
yes.
Under the fearless rule of Darth Mounty, we must be very serious. Yes. Very, very serious indeed. Last week's episode about daredevils was very serious. Very informative and very serious.
Absolutely, that was really cool, actually.
That being, the stories about the beaver sharks, maybe not so much. I don't know. I'm a little concerned that we're going to bring back Team Nick and Party Marty for a rebuttal.
That is true, yes.
Nick's illegitimate father will be very upset about their rebuttal.
Angela Hunt has joined us. Angela, great to see you.
Hello, Angela, our frequent flyer on this show. Best way to describe her, probably #1 fan at this point.
Oh, she's wonderful, and probably among the elite of the tour guides in our community. Sorry, I'm just setting you up here with that little person over your shoulder.
Oh, no.
I know.
Oh.
I know.
Oh, we have Mounty and Mounty.
Yes. Where are you? Where are you?
See, every time you try to add me in.
Yeah, but somehow...
I've been thrown into the void, Peter.
I know.
Darth Mounty, why would you do such a thing? I've been on your side.
Oh, wait a minute. Darth Mounty looks like he's up to something anyway.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes. But, yeah, just getting things back on track here. Ooh, I knocked you out. I'm sorry. Oh.
I've been thrown into the void by Darth Mounty.
All right, I have to fix you right now. Bear with me.
Oh, there's no fixing me. It's too far gone, Peter.
No,
it's all over.
There is fixing.
Well, in the meantime, I could... What we should talk about... USA Niagara released its official summer calendar last week.
It did?
Yeah, Destination Niagara. So all the events, they're bringing back movies on Old Fall Street is coming back this year, so that'll be fun. There's a bunch of concerts. June 24th, I believe, it's a Saturday, is Skydive at the Falls, is doing the Skydive over Niagara Falls. Plus, it's Pride Weekend. Plus, there is a 5K/10K run being sponsored by The Craft. So there's 3 events happening on June 24th. So if you're looking about a month out right now and looking at something to do, I believe it's a Saturday, June 24th, go do that. Also, June 2nd, there's a trivia night at Power City Eatery. The topic is, we're not certain of what the topic's going to be. It has been suggested the questions will possibly be about the Underground Railroad in Niagara Falls. So that would be really fun. I've gotten a sneak peek on some of those questions. That's a cool one because it's $25 to enter up to 5 people, and you can win up to $100 in catering from Power City. So that's super cool. Other things that are happening. Darth Mounty and I actually went to Victorianburg.
You did?
We did. Picked up a couple of bottles of Pachette.
Oh, that is a very popular wine there. People love that.
It is an amazing... So for those of you who have never had Pachette from Victorianburg Wine Estate, this is, from me, not sponsored. For the show, kind of sponsored. They were a sponsor of the show. That's not how I started with Pachette, though. So I was over at the Easter event at the Eastern Hills a couple of months ago, also with Darth Mounty, oddly enough. Spent a lot of quality time with Darth Mounty. And while we were looking in search of great poutine and the fabulous Molson Canadian, we came across the fine winery people. Winery, that was, say that 5 times fast. The fine people of Victorianburg Wine Estate who were having samples. And one of the samples they were doing were mimosas that they made with orange juice and Pachette. Pachette is a sparkling peach wine. So it's kind of like it's like a peach Moscato almost, but it's sparkling.
It's quite refreshing.
It's absolutely amazing. And mixing it with orange juice, on its own, it is the most amazing thing I've ever had. But mixing it with orange juice, and it's like, oh wow, so this is what being fancy tastes like. This is what having money and going to brunch tastes like.
Victorianburg is actually one of the most elegant stops on the route, if not to me anyway. Dan and Victoria, it was named for Victoria. Dan was in our military service for many years. He learned his winemaking in Germany. And they established themselves about 10 years ago. I remember I was there when they were first opening. And they have a rose garden. Every rose has the name Victoria in it in some way. A beautiful setting inside, some things they've gotten from old churches to combine with what looks like a rustic French setting. And then outside, the dining areas, there's multiple, not dining, but tasting areas, multiple patios in various areas that, just a beautiful setting.
It really is. It was absolutely fabulous. So if you and your personal Darth Mounty want to go see a winery, just first of all, go along the Niagara Wine Trail. It's absolutely fabulous. That was not the only winery that we hit over the weekend. We did hit multiples, which is always fun, doing wine tastings. Some inadvertently ended up in Olcott along the beach, because after you have wine, you want food. And then we ended up over at the little shops near Olcott. It was the North Oceanburg McPlaterson thing. That North Oceanburg McPlaterson, which was an interesting combo. And then we went over to Brownie's over in Wilson and got ice cream. I have a very serious question for Darth Mounty, and Darth Mounty does not need to answer this question. Darth Mounty, what is your favorite flavor of ice cream?
Eat yourself. Well, I think that's well put. I have to try that.
I know, right? Yeah. Darn, I was gonna guess. I was gonna guess Rocky Road. Not sure why. No. It's Panda Paws, isn't it? It's Panda Paws.
Oh, wow.
Moral of the story. Moral of the story is, apparently, now you know how Panda Paws is made, right, Peter?
No, enlighten me.
Okay, so Panda Paws, well, you know how poutine is made, right?
Oh, yes. Well.
Of course. So Panda Paws is similar but different. How Panda Paws is made is they take the pandas and they take their lightsabers and they just... I'm going to stop right there.
Well, you certainly have Darth Mounty in agreement with you right now.
That is favorite flavor.
There you go. It's like Irish shepherd's pie, you know. Like if it's made with real Irish shepherds, I love it.
It's true.
Yeah,
I mean,
the fake stuff, you know, just doesn't cut it.
Yeah, the stuff from the box just
true.
Canned is okay in a pan.
So hey, Lenny Carlson is joining us. He says too funny. Anyone who knows Lenny, he's one of our tour guide colleagues out there. He is too funny, and he has a great deal of fun on his tours. And nice to see you there, Lenny, joining Angela. Anyone else out there want to pipe in so we can give you a shout out?
Oh yeah, we also do have a call-in number.
Oh, that's right. Give me a moment. It's 716-957-5258. And it's great if you could call in, because then it would make us like a real show. So far, people, oh yes, Rebecca, if you're watching, the answer is yes. I am bringing Red Bulls on Sunday to the staff.
That is very important.
Oh, it is a Red Bull Day every year when I bring Red Bulls. And accidentally last year gave one to a 14-year-old, and her mother. But let me just.
I remember that.
Connected here. 716-957-5258 is the number. I'll put it up on the screen in a moment. But we'd love to take your calls and have you kind of chat with us, things that you like. You don't have to stay on topic. We're going to touch on the Erie Canal in a little while, but definitely we want to make sure we connect with all of our friends here on both sides, Canada and the U.S.
Yes.
So we're just
Peter,
waiting.
what is your favorite ice cream place in either side of the border, I guess?
Either side of the border?
Yeah.
I'd have to say oh man, that's a tough one. I used to love this place that was over on in St. Catharines, but my favorite now has to be the Perry's place in Perry, New York. Now, because I used to live down by there. And around here, I really enjoy Twist of the Mist right by the falls. They serve Perry's. They're a nice place. The people are really friendly. It's the one you come across the border and it's an ice cream cone right in front of you. Great way to welcome anyone to the United States.
We have a Statue of Liberty on one side and a giant ice cream cone on the other. I mean, what's more Niagara Falls than that?
I don't know. Maybe a burglary? No. I know, we goof around.
Darth Mounty is very disappointed at your humor.
Oh, Darth, please. Oh, no. Yeah, darn. Sorry, Darth. Oh, you're even breathing crying. Oh. Let's play O Canada. Let's just have some comments from a bunch of Canadians.
Yes, you've disappointed everyone.
Who put that in there? And where's Zoe? I haven't seen Zoe in a while.
Zoe, hello!
No, she's not here. Sorry to...
I'm starting to see where Julian got his soundboard technique.
Yeah, I know, and it's just because I was fumbling around trying to get the get everything sorted out here. We got in late tonight, folks. We did start on time.
We did.
But so yeah, it's let me see. We've got Angela. We've got a number of people tuning in. So hopefully someone will call in. I'm putting up the number now, and then we'll get started on our topic for today.
Our topic.
Yes, the Erie. Oh yes, Darth.
The spooky canal?
Yes, the Erie Canal.
Oh, that was it.
Well put, though. Well put. Hang on. We're going to just do this here. One moment.
We're gonna do it. I'll start by prefacing the Erie Canal. It was what I know about the Erie Canal as an American.
My fellow Americans.
My fellow Americans. we're not doing that. It was completed in 1825.
Exactly.
That I know that. That was on the test. It was known as Clinton's Folly.
Or Clinton's Ditch.
That too. Angela said that Lake Effect is right. I love Lake Effect ice cream in Lockport and Buffalo. Saw Cow's ice cream in Canada, but didn't get to try it yet.
Oh yes, Cow's is great. I actually have one of their shirts I showed a few months ago. We have it here in the studio. David never takes his gifts home, so isn't that nice?
Oh, you didn't mention Dee Dee's.
I was gonna mention that. See, Mounty is in agreement with me. See, Darth Mounty, even though Darth Mounty looks like a Canadian, Darth Mounty is actually born and raised right here in the Niagara Falls, New York.
What?
That's right. That's right. This was a plot twist. We were trying to CanCon the entire time. You're 2 against 1, Peter. 2 against 1.
2 Americans and just me.
But yeah, if you're a local from here, the answer is Dee Dee's Dairy. It's always Dee Dee's.
Dee Dee's.
It's always been Dee Dee's.
Well, people have so many favorites in this area. I remember living in Kenmore, and people loved Ted's Hot Dogs, or they love Reed's, who have locations in Lockport and here. And Lenny Carlson says, moo.
That is the appropriate response. Lenny likes to get his ice cream directly from the source. You throw a cow into a blizzard.
You must be mad. Cow disease. So you were talking about the Erie Canal. And let me just start getting some images up there. We'll talk a little bit about it and its significance in this area. So you were right. It was founded in 1825. It was called Clinton's Ditch or Clinton's Folly. And Clinton, who I had the pleasure to reenact as on a number of occasions, there he is, DeWitt Clinton. A very interesting story about this man. He was he went to college. He went to New York University and studied natural sciences. And at the time, around 1810, when they were considering the canal, he was part of a team that traveled through New York State. Some people were proponents of using existing rivers and waterways, but he was against that because of the ongoing up and down, ebb and flow of water, how it would be high in some seasons and low in the others. And so he was a proponent of creating a standalone canal, digging it, which he did. He started in 1819 in Rome, New York, right midway between the Hudson River and Buffalo. That way, when you get started with a canal, you're going to have to finish it. Otherwise, it's not just going to be a ditch coming from one side. And DeWitt Clinton, he was governor of New York several times. He was mayor of New York City. People don't know he was the founder of the New York City school system and accomplished many things. One thing about him that I really enjoyed from portraying him and researching him was the fact that he was a politician who stood his ground. In fact, he was voted out as governor while they were building the canal, but then voted back in 2 years later. He stood his ground. They called it Clinton's Ditch, Clinton's Folly. And it was the way that the press and the other politicians ridiculed him for what they thought would be a failure. But when it opened in 1825, prior to that, if you had a ton of wheat to move from Lake Erie to New York Harbor, it took you a month to move it to New York along the roadways. It cost you $100. When the canal opened, it took 5 days, and it cost you $10. So it expanded the American economic reach. You could now get goods like raw materials, harvested goods, lumber, all down the Erie Canal to New York Harbor and then to world markets. So it expanded the American economic prosperity that way, and it brought immigrants into the continent, which is why, for instance, you'll see large concentrations of Italian, Polish, Irish, in German even, in various areas like Cleveland, Buffalo, Toledo, Milwaukee with its German influence, Detroit. All these cities benefited from the fact that immigrants being processed through Ellis Island could board boats up the Hudson River and travel along packet boats to Lake Erie, where they would board Lakers or lake boats and then travel to cities where they would eventually move and settle. So if it hadn't been for the Erie Canal, Ellis Island would have been in Philadelphia. That's a known fact. So rather interesting. That was DeWitt Clinton. He was a politician who stood by his guns. Today, if you get a politician who comes under that kind of fire, what do? They back up, they backtrack, they give up. And back in those days, he stood by his guns, and I think that was pretty significant. Darth Mounty, how do you feel about that? Is that in accordance with what you would have hoped, or? Oh, good. Okay, well, thank you, because DeWitt Clinton, I don't think, ever saw Star Wars, so that was just interestingly enough.
It's okay. I'm not sure if Darth Mounty has seen Star Wars either.
All right, I'm going to start bringing up just a couple more pictures to talk about it.
Yeah.
I've been doing tours for 40 years, and I design a lot of different tours based on historic events. I do a women's suffrage called Skirting Justice. I do one on the Erie Canal that is called Clinton's Ditch. And the Erie Canal, when it was opened, was a mechanism by which you traveled through New York State and bypassed Niagara Falls. If there had been no impediment to the Niagara River, you wouldn't need the Erie Canal or the Welland Canal we talked about a few weeks ago. You could have traveled straight to Lake Erie and up into the Upper Lakes. Here's a view from what was the Flight of 5 in Lockport, New York. Now, this is prior to recent modifications. I'm going up there next week, and I'm going to be taking photos of the way they've developed this area. That's looking eastward, or pardon me, that's looking westward, pardon me, from the Flight of 5. You can see a railway bridge up in the distance, but it was it was where they climbed the Niagara Escarpment. The Niagara Escarpment is what causes Niagara Falls. It started falling over down near Lewiston, where the big hill is, and then it continued as the falls moved back. It was moved through different cities. Like, here's a view of the Erie Canal in Middleport, New York. As you can see, there were horses, sometimes oxen, and more generally mules that would pull the boats along the canal. And I was asking you earlier, do you know the song 15 Miles on the Erie Canal?
I think everyone knows that it haunts their dreams at night.
It really does. But the whole idea of 15 miles on the Erie Canal was derived from the fact that the boats would have mules or oxen pulling them. You would have a team of the oxen or mules on the boat, and then you would have a team pulling it at the same time. Every 15 miles, you would switch out those teams. So here's another example of it, where a carriage, or I forget what they call it, a sulky, I think, and it's pulling a boat today. This is a current reenactment of the Erie Canal, available further down near the Mohawk River. But the canal was a very efficient way to move people into the continent and to move goods and products out to market through New York Harbor. Now, you live in North Tonawanda. Do you know the nickname of North Tonawanda?
Ooh. Lumber City.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that came about because when trees were felled along the Erie Canal, and they were, and forgive me, I'm putting up photos and talking at the same time, but when trees were felled, there were lumber yards all along the river. I think about 7 miles of them. And they used those things to prepare the wood that was being shipped out to market. So you would have trees taken to North Tonawanda. They'd be cut into boards and panels and planks and 2x4s, and then shipped down on the packet boats that would travel the canal down to New York Harbor and then be shipped out or shipped elsewhere in the country. This is a photo at Erie Canal Cruise and Erie Canal Cruises, Lockport Locks it's called, Erie Canal Cruises. And this is a reenactor friend of mine, Guy Gain, and a young woman named Anne-Marie Berger, who played Maria Spelterini at the State Park for many years. And they were part of a reenactment on the canal around the Civil War time. And this was just a beautiful setting, but you see behind them the two boats. They've got a third boat now that's a paddle wheel there on the Erie Canal. Another interesting fact about Erie Canal and Lockport is this church. You see it from when you're on the boat, or you can see it when you're driving past. This small church was built, I can't remember the man's name, and I'm not going to look it up, but it was built by a man who wanted to be married in his home church in England. So he built it as an exact replica of his home church in England, and he got married there, and the church stood as a church for many years afterwards. So it's one of the fascinating facts about the Erie Canal.
It was funny. I was just reading about the Erie Canal for a different thing. I was doing some research, and it was actually about, we were following the trail of the Underground Railroad through Western New York, I found out that the Erie Canal did actually play somewhat of a critical role, because water passage was an easier route at times, obviously, than passage over land. And when freedom seekers were escaping from the south northward, a lot of them were settling along the canal. So there was also a bunch of safe houses built alongside of the canal. So if you go into communities around here like Lockport and North Tonawanda and regions like that, there's still like houses that there's not much of a record, because obviously there was not a record of the secret Underground Railroad.
Right.
Things were kept very hush-hush for obvious reasons. But there are, there's houses built with like triple cellars and things that were very, hidden rooms and things that were built during that time period. And it was to hide these, freedom seekers away as they were being transported up towards Canada.
Well, and that's absolutely right. The Murphy Orchards out in Burton, New York, near Lockport, still has the hidden room in the basement. I've got pictures of it. One day we'll talk on the Underground Railroad. But they're in the barn. They've got a hidden room. They've got a lot of elements that you can see. It was a safe house, and people followed waterways. That's the best way to travel. especially at night, because you're trying to get north. Once you got into New York State, most of the rivers and streams traveled to Lake Ontario. So it helped you find your bearings. And the Erie Canal was a tremendous source of, or a location, a very popular location. And also the Erie Canal was used by farmers all along to irrigate their farms. The water in the Erie Canal flows in from Lake Erie and empties into the Hudson River. So it travels 363 miles and almost 632 feet in elevation it has to cross to get from the Hudson River to the to Lake Erie. Here's an image of Buffalo. This is in Buffalo Harbor along the Erie Canal, as they say, and you see multiple teams of mules pulling the boats. That building, I believe, is still there in Buffalo Harbor, but there's a lot in the Canal Side district of Buffalo that still takes you back to that era. And we had an interesting conversation earlier. Darth Mounty, are we okay to talk about that little story about the Buffalo Gals? Or would you approve that? Wonderful, thank you. The Buffalo Gals, we all know the song, right?
Buffalo gals, won't you come on tonight?
Yep.
Come on tonight, come on tonight. Buffalo gals, won't you come on tonight? And you know, something about the light on the moon, you know that part.
And Dance by the Light of the Moon.
Yeah, something like that.
So the story of that, from what has been taught in Buffalo, is that back around the turn of the last century, where it goes from the 1800s to the 1900s, and remember, the Erie Canal is what made Buffalo the successful city it was. It grew into an important rail terminus. In around 1900, there was a train going or coming every 20 minutes in Buffalo around the clock. And so you had trains, you had canal, which is ship.
Except when you needed the train, Peter.
Pardon me?
In 1901, when you really needed that train to be there on time from Niagara Falls, New York to Buffalo to pick up one certain Dr. Roswell Park to head over to the Temple of Music for, no big reason. Apparently they couldn't get the train there on time.
And we're talking about the McKinley assassination, right?
Yeah.
Actually, there's a Canadian link to that. I'll tell you that in a second. But back in that day, transportation in Buffalo was a key element of its industry. It was the grain port of the Great Lakes. Everything was harvested out west, was brought through the Great Lakes from Duluth, Minnesota, Lake Superior, down through Huron and Erie, and it was delivered to the grain silos in Buffalo. In fact, the grain elevator was invented in Buffalo in 1842 by Alexander Dart. And so many things happened in Buffalo, and it was a major economic terminus. Back to the Buffalo Gals. So what comes with shipping and sailors, but the various proclivities they have in their lives, and one of those is female companionship. In Buffalo, there were actually brothels, and they were quite busy on the nights that sailors and days that the sailors came into port, and when they would have leave from the ship, they would go off and look for entertainment in various ways, and I'm sure drink and the company of the opposite gender or whatever they sought. And in that day, the brothels in Buffalo were doing a booming business. So prostitutes in New York City learned of this, I guess, through the sailors, how busy it was in Buffalo, and a number of them relocated to Buffalo to try and set up brothels there of their own. But it turned out that the Buffalo brothels were still being frequented, and that they couldn't make a big dent into the existing business. The sailors just weren't coming in the numbers they were to the Buffalo brothels, and it led things boiled over to where one night a group of New York prostitutes came out into the street by the Buffalo brothels and called the Buffalo Gals out to dance in the light of the moon. In other words, a fight. But the police did intervene, and the song came about from that. So Angela's pointing out, like so many things in Lockport, the cemetery has the seven Sutherland sisters. We'll have to talk about them. I got photos of all of them. She's talking about the Keenan Center, the Arts Center there. Lockport has an excellent theater on Main Street, and it also has the largest or widest bridge in the world that you go under on the cruises. So back to we talked about Buffalo Gals and Buffalo. The Erie Canal played a huge role in not just Buffalo, but in numerous other cities. Like Lockport has these recreated buildings along the canal, and they show you the affluence and the influence that the canal had on all these cities. You could see all over the place. Lyons, New York. Here's a shot of it. This is a bit blurry, sorry. But all kinds of images exist of where the canal was, the canal had impacted on other cities. And it was an economic boom, and it led to America's economic growth in a huge way. And once you got into the Upper Lakes now, you had cities that were thriving, like Chicago, Buffalo, Detroit, and you had access to shipping. You mentioned about shipping earlier. By ship is the cheapest way to transport any bulk cargo. That it remains today in this world. That's one of the things that that we know is that shipping is still the cheapest way. And here's Lockport again. Now you see the boat on the right that used to be a big warehouse above it. It's being renovated into a museum of sorts. The bridges you see in the middle, they lift. So as the ship approaches the dock, the ships or the what do they call it, the toll. You see the little white building right next to it. They would lift the bridge and your boat would pass underneath. The ship on the right actually appeared in the movie Mystic Pizza, which I believe was set in, is it Connecticut or Rhode Island? But it's on the East Coast, and the boat is in that. They had a date on that boat. I believe it was Julia Roberts. But that boat was purchased by Mike Murphy and his organization, Lockport Locks and Erie Canal Cruises, and has been used there as one of their boats ever since. And I'm just going to quickly go around and see if there's anything else I can show you. Yeah. But,
I mean, that's like one of the things you mentioned earlier. We were talking about Lumber City and North Tonawanda. And the Tonawandas, both North Tonawanda, City of Tonawanda, they have Canal Fest, which is like huge every year. It wasn't going to happen this year. It's happening again this year. Like they changed their mind. It's going to happen. But there's there's a lot of stuff built along the canal. And also in North Tonawanda, what you see is the mansions. The lumber barons, they made so much money on selling lumber. They built these solid wood mansions with that lumber, and these mansions are massive. There's a lot of them still in existence, specifically like along Bryant Street. I actually got to go into one which had been carved into 11 separate apartments.
Oh, wow.
One mansion had been, and it wasn't like they were carved into 11 closets. There was like a couple of these were like 800, 900, 1,000 square foot apartments. It was 3 floors plus full basement, all wood, original carving and stuff, and like all like stairwell that looked like it was out of it's a mansion, like solid carved wood and wood paneling, and the outside is wood, and it's all it was built in around, usually they say right around the 1890s or so. The one I looked at, which was on Bryant Street, was built, but they're all built right around that time period of like the late 1800s, right around the same time that North Tonawanda was incorporated as a city. Which is funny because you look at like the 2 latest created cities within the Niagara County were the city of Niagara Falls and the city of North Tonawanda, which I just always find so funny because they were carved out of the towns, which were then carved out of bigger towns. Like when you look at old maps of Niagara County and you see that like back before there was Niagara Falls as Niagara Falls, it was all Cambria. Everything was Cambria. And then it was carved down into like the town of Niagara within Cambria. And then within town of Niagara was like the village of Suspension Bridge and Schlosser and Manchester and the village of Niagara Falls and things. And like Suspension Bridge was also Bellevue, and they were constantly kind of shifting and rearranging. And then in 1892, all of that was incorporated, and basically about half of the town of Niagara was converted into the city of Niagara Falls. And then in 1927, the village of LaSalle, which is where our lovely studio is located right here in LaSalle, in 1927, this was incorporated into the city of Niagara Falls, which is why you get really weird lines in the city of Niagara Falls. Like LaSalle High School used to sit where the current Walmart is on Military Road. So that Walmart is part of the city of Niagara Falls. Across the street is not, and next to it is not. All of that's town of Niagara, but there's this weird, like, random, like, blip on the, and if you ever look at a map of the city of Niagara Falls, there's, like, a bunch of weird jagged edges as you approach LaSalle, because while the 1892 one was kind of a neat cut right along, I want to say it's probably, where is the cut line? I've seen it kind of halfway down Hyde Park Boulevard. Like it goes, I know that the top of it is right on the edge of DeVoe before you hit Devil's Hole, is where it switches over to Lewiston. There's a right portion that's kind of right in between, or just past Hyde Park Boulevard, which at the time would have been Sugar Street. And then it like continues all the way up Route 62 to like 100th or 102nd Street before you hit the airport. The airport is not in Niagara Falls. That is technically kind of, is it in town of Niagara or is it in Wheatfield?
I don't know. It's one of the two.
Because Bell Aerospace is in Wheatfield. And Bell Aerospace is, we've talked about that before, how Jaeger broke the sound barrier thanks to Bell Aerospace.
Yes.
So, yeah, Americans probably wouldn't, I mean, we built parts for the Apollo missions and the space shuttle. We wouldn't have gotten to the moon if it wasn't for Niagara. So just remember that. Just remember that we could say it was Kennedy. It was all Niagara Falls. It's always been Niagara Falls.
Yeah, right.
We're the Erie Canal. The only thing Niagara Falls doesn't have is the Erie Canal. Oddly enough,
we caused it.
we had to build the Erie Canal because of Niagara Falls. So we even get claim on that. You know.
And another thing is like today the Erie Canal exists as a recreational waterway mostly. There are some areas that have operational and commercial boats that are doing something locally, but not on the scale that the canal had reached. The canal's demise actually came in 1959. Its real ending came when the St. Lawrence Seaway was fully operational, and that was bringing ships from as we talked about a few weeks ago, from the Atlantic Ocean all the way to Duluth, Minnesota. So they bypass Buffalo now and travel right up into the St. Lawrence River, etc., or down from it. Here's a couple of the last photos I've got of the Erie Canal because of what it does today. And a lot of us who are tour guides talk about this because it's a good day two experience. You can do it the next day in Niagara County. Pardon me, if you live east of here, whether it's Boston, Rochester, New York City, Maryland, you can visit here and then make your way home. And this is the Erie Canal in Lockport, where there are several locks still functioning. And that's actually my youngest daughter at the front. And we're entering a canal lock there, and they actually function. You get into the lock, they close the doors, they're watertight, and then they fill the chamber, and your ship goes up. You can touch the wall, and these are walls that ships went along for for 200 years. And once the water has leveled off with the next lock, then it opens and you progress and so forth, and you climb the escarpment. So the Erie Canal, our point tonight was that it really is part of the story of Niagara Falls. It is part of our story because it was compelled by the fact you couldn't navigate past the falls. And Maid of the Mist have been trying since 1846. Every time they go up that river, they hit a big waterfall and can't go any further. No, but Maid of the Mist is one of the best experiences in the world, one of the safest boat rides. But
it is.
It's simply because of Niagara Falls that we have the Erie Canal. And now, no matter where you go on the Erie Canal, from here to Albany, there are activities, there are recreations, museums, locks that have been reconstructed for you, and they tell a big part of our nation's history. So, amen.
Beautiful story about the Erie Canal. It was funny, you just mentioned the Maid of the Mist, and my brain did that. It made that sound because I knew Darth Mountie was watching me. Mm-hmm. But really, what it did, I was telling the story of Bossy Sims again, as I often do. Bossy Sims the cow. My favorite story in the whole wide world, the cow over, just walking around over top of Niagara Falls. But that led me, because I was trying to find, there's a specific quote about Bossy Sims that says the reason Bossy was no longer allowed to walk into the falls was because tour guides were so angry at this cow making a mockery of the power of Niagara. It took me like 2 hours to find that quote because, of course, there's only one place that had it. It was the Buffalo News. But that led me to find out something else about my other favorite story, Captain Joel Robinson.
Yes.
So we've talked about before Captain Joel Robinson taking the Maid of the Mist through the Class 6 rapids in order to sell it off in Queenston. We've talked about that, right, Peter?
Yep.
Okay. Did you know that he did stunting before that?
I am aware that he did something reaching up, because they have an island named after him, that he reached using a steel pole.
That's exactly. So I didn't know this, and it's in the Bossy Sims story. And as it goes, according to the story I was reading, he saw this cow in the river and saw this cow just walk across the upper Niagara Rapids, mere feet from the falls, and walk over to Goat Island, that he decided, hey, if a cow can do this, I can totally do this. And he got a giant steel staff and walked himself across to Goat Island through the water. So the reason he did that is because of the cow. It all comes back to Bossy Sims. So the reason why the Maid of the Mist, because that's Captain Joel Robinson got his taste of just crazy things he could do, and now he decides to take the boat and sell it off in Queenston, run it through the Class 6 rapids, and famously, take the boat during the Civil War and sell it off, him and two mates driving it through the whirlpool. But I don't think he would have done that if he wouldn't have tried to do the pole stunt before and get that taste of daredeviling, and that wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for a cow by the name of Bossy Sims. So I vote to rename Goat Island into Bossy Sims Island.
I'm all for that, given the significance of the story. Hang on, let's check in with, of course, with Darth Mountie. A little undecided there. Okay.
Do you have Darth Mountie? Darth, you've been pretty quiet through most of the day. What is your personal opinion? Do you think Goat Island should stay named Goat Island? Do you think what is your opinion on the island? We've had Two Bear Island after the Michigan. We've had now Bossy Sims Island after Bossy the cow. Obviously, Goat Island is after Stedman's goat. What would you name it?
Actually, to be honest, I don't have any other suggestions. I really don't. I like all of the stories, honestly, like genuinely. And I mean, it's been called Goat Island since I was born, so I have no qualms about it necessarily. If there was some sort of renaming competition, I would say that it would have to be in par with any of the stories that we've heard that you've told.
I agree. Also,
how about the Death Island? No, that was the star. Sorry.
Superlasers.
Yeah.
That's no moon. Okay, also, you do know. So I know Peter knows this.
Okay.
But I don't know if you know this. Because we haven't talked about this, Darth.
No.
Do you know why Luna Island is named Luna Island?
I do not. Do tell.
Because it's named after Luna Falls.
Oh.
Do you know what Luna Falls is?
I should, but I don't.
Luna Falls is the Bridal Veil Falls.
Okay.
It used to be known as Luna Falls. Do you know why Luna Falls is named Luna Falls?
No, I don't.
Because the mist off of it would create lunar rainbows.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So, I mean, I personally think that calling it Bridal Veil Falls is kind of too cheeky now. I get it. We were in the honeymoon capital of the world.
I was going to say we're the honeymoon capital of the world.
But, it used to be Luna Falls. And on a lot, if you look at old stereograms, those old, double cards for, stereoscopes, they said, it'd be the American and Luna Falls. So in the early 1900s, when you're still deciding what to call these things, Goat Island was also known as Iris Island. It was because of the irises.
I remember that. Yeah.
And it was because of the iris plant that grew on it. Is that the reason why, or does it have another rainbow joke?
With almost everything in nomenclature in this place, the naming, there's so many different interpretations of how things came about, but. I'll have to look back on that one. I mean, I've got books you've never seen that are from 1917. If Dave will ever give it back, yeah, Dave. And but yeah, so many things were named for stories that now you'll get 5 different stories as to why it was named.
Do you have Peter Porter's original travel guide from 1901?
Not yet.
Yeah, we need to get that. That's where Bossy Sims is in that. Bossy Sims is in the 19... Now, mind you, Bossy Sims happened in the 1860.
Oh, Angela suspects that the goats ate all the irises.
That is possible.
Oh,
that is. But there was only one goat and so many irises.
Oh, here's something, too, that Angela brought up earlier. I just thought I'd give a teaser of. These are the 7 Sutherland sisters. And they had massively long hair. And they would sell the hair tonic. Their father would sell a hair tonic to based on the fact his daughters had such beautiful hair. So that's where that story came from. It's one of Lockport's stories. And also in Buffalo, the commercial slip is still there. Those are walls that were built in the 1830s and 40s. So you've got quite a bit of history in Buffalo as well. And now Iris Island, we're going to have to double check that one and see what else there is in history for that. But this is what gives us the challenge and why we want people to call in. Is that we've got so many people who have stories, have interpretations of their own. And I want to hear them because people don't make them up. A lot of people hear them from sources. So something had to spark the reason for that.
Yeah.
You know, like gossip or rumor, often comes from a shred of truth.
Yeah. There's a lot of history in Niagara Falls just in general that gets lost, not so much in translation, just by word of mouth and loss of artifacts, loss of documents, misplaced, records kind of things. Like, a lot of people don't know that we have a city historian, and that's like a thing.
We have a city historian.
We have a city historian, yeah, exactly. So,
no, we don't. No, we do have a city historian, but you've seen the city. You and I have both seen the city archives.
Yeah.
And honestly, the plans for the Death Star were a little bit more well maintained, unfortunately.
But those are the problems that we have. It's like certain things were maintained, others they were not, either through neglect or intentional means. I'm not saying that literally those were all the cases, but in some cases I'm sure there were some.
I've run into situations with local history, and Peter knows this, I've gone on tangents, where when I was doing my research for urban renewal, which was from the 60s through, and I was covering all the way to 2003.
Yeah,
so 1963 to 2003. The closer I got to current day, the harder it was for me to find information within the city archives.
Exactly.
By the point you hit the 1980s, the city archives just drop off, and everyone's like, well, the rest of it's not history. I'm like, okay, so in 20 years from now, when I'm asking what happened now, they have. So it's like, oh, well, you should just know it. I'm like, I wasn't born then.
Yeah.
I didn't live through this. I'm trying to explain this to people that didn't live here through this.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, which is the number one thing that we found, public memory is faulty.
It is.
Public memory is faulty, and it is also easily controlled by whatever the most popular narrative is. Which was the common narrative at the time was, we've talked about Eden Lackey before on the show, and Eden Lackey tore down the city, and everything fell apart, and then nothing recovered, and then it's like, okay, he died in 1977. What happened from 1977 to 2023 to work within the city of Niagara Falls? And there's just sort of this, it was Lackey. It's like Lackey's been dead for 40-something years.
Well, remember I was telling you about the dig for the Cataract House? It's over by the Turtle Red Coach area.
I was there when I went to the preservation meeting, and people were asking what specific documentation that we could find buried under the ground, and like
the physical structure,
like
the bones of the building.
And also so much time. They're like, well, did you find anything very specific to the Underground Railroad? And it was like, okay, first of all, the Underground Railroad wouldn't have anything very, very specific to it. That's not what it was.
Yeah, and the whole point of that was to not leave any kind of trace behind so that no one could be found.
And the building burned down in 1945.
Yep, and we still don't know why.
Yeah.
That's the other thing. So that's a mixed bag about whether it was set on fire on purpose, whether it was an accident, that whole public memory. Some people know, some people don't, and we haven't gotten the entire story.
People are very adamant that it was insurance fraud. And I find that to be funny. Because it's like...
Well, considering what the Cataract House stood for, I wouldn't be surprised if it had been burned down. intentionally. You know what I mean?
But at the same time, like...
Not to get off topic, I'm sorry.
No, that is on topic. That is, we're talking about public memory and we're talking about historical events. I'm happy you brought up the Cataract House because it's something we don't talk about often.
Well, no one talks about it. I didn't hear about it until they did the dig for it, and I was physically there.
Yeah, I heard it when the Underground Railroad Heritage Center opened. That's pretty much when I was like, wait,
exactly,
this?
And then finding out about like the suspension bridge and that it was actually used, for shuttling freedom seekers across.
Yeah, and that's like there's so much, and it's net. We've been kind of deep diving into a bit of this. Part of my side things that I have to do is actually dig some of the research for this and pick it up from
just Niagara Falls history in general. Like we're not getting the full scope. This is not a slight on any kind of like education system or anything like that. We're not getting the full history on the area that we live in, so we tend to get that negative portrayal of, like the Canada side's better because of this and this and this and this. It's because we're not taught the entire history of the area that we live in, so that people tend to not have the love for it that they could/should.
That's such a valid point. And there is this blind obsession with Canada is better because the American side is inferior. And the American side is bad because it used to be good and now it's bad.
Yeah.
Even though historically, not necessarily true. And here's a photo of the Cataract House, as we were talking about earlier. This is, and I
don't want to give away too many details about like the fact that you could like put your feet in the water or anything like that. If you're going to talk about it later on.
No, because we rarely talk about it. But the Cataract House was the most popular hotel and restaurant in Niagara Falls in the 1800s. Presidents.
Yeah, it supposedly started off like the whole concept of like chain hotels, like luxury hotels.
This is the reason why hotels are the way they are, is because of the Cataract House. And also at the same time, you're having a situation in the Cataract House where you had so many famous people and so many wealthy people coming, and of course they're coming from the South.
Yes.
And the staff of the Cataract House with head waiter John Morrison, who themselves had escaped slavery, were personally rowing people, sneaking them through the back doors and rowing them across to freedom.
Yes.
While the managers were covering for them. And this is like, and the fact that this, now I started looking and like, oddly enough, Canada started covering it. Like, Canada's looking to make a mini-series about what happened at the Cataract House.
Okay.
And it's like, oh, great for Canada to pick up on something that happened right here in Niagara Falls, New York.
Yeah, it had to start here to get over there.
The last, that one river to cross, that was right here.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I feel like sometimes, like, everyone else has an appreciation for our history, but us within it, same thing, like, everyone around the world really appreciates Niagara Falls.
Yeah.
Like, when I tell them, and they'll be like, well, I was told the Canadian side's so much better, but I've been to the Canadian side, and I like this side. And I'm like, because they're different. They're so different. They're a completely different...
Exactly, and I wouldn't say one side is better than the other. I feel like if, like we were discussing before, if you like nature, the more nature aspect, you want to stand next to the falls and actually feel the mist and whatnot, you want to be on this side. If you want, as you said, the postcard version, you want to go to the opposite side. And then there are bars and, some museums and things, little smaller ones. But, it just depends on what you're interested in. If you want to go bar hop, you go to that side. If you want to, walk around the park and then go, across or back and forth, you get the experience of both. I think you should really do both.
Yeah, if you have the ability, do both sides. In our side, the other thing with the American side is it's spread out. I like Angela refers to as cookie versus brownie, coffee versus tea. And that is true. I'd say the American side is coffee, specifically coffee brewed over a campfire. That's what very strong, very interesting. But we have so much history on our side, and it's history that is overlooked. So
it's kind of glossed over.
It really is, but that also, it's a blessing and a curse, because like if you go over to the Canadian side and there's something that's like a historic place and it's a historic structure and it's historic this, it's been converted into something, or sometimes it's really good. It's like the hydroelectric power plant they just did. It's been done really well. You get the point. It's celebrating the history of hydropower. It's that. Other times it's like, we turned it into Wrigley's Believe It or Not. It's a little bit of a circus. Look at this pretty natural thing we turned into a fun house. And it's like it's 6 of one, half a dozen. Our side, It's probably not open, but you could go see it. Like, you know, It's like this building is on the historic register. You can't get into it because it's not a museum. It's not anything. The Adams Station is still sitting on Buffalo Avenue, empty. It's used for storage, which is surreal that the, last remaining building on the factory that Tesla and Westinghouse electrified the world in is sitting there holding storage for boats.
Exactly.
But it's still there, untouched. It's as it was.
Or how we were kind of like discussing when we passed, I forgot exactly what place we were going, but we were headed down the boulevard, and we were discussing how the airport right there has one of the longest runways in,
New York State.
Yeah, New York State.
Yeah.
Like, it's perfect for, international travel and whatnot, but we're not using it. You know what I mean?
It's just not utilized as such.
Yeah.
Same thing, and right next to that is, right next to the airport, and we have a museum there. We have the Niagara Aerospace Museum. And
I think it's only open 2 days.
Yeah, because it has limited hours and it's very limited. People don't know what's there. And right next to that is Bell Aerospace, who built the X-1 that Yeager used to break the sound barrier and built the parts, built the test system for the lunar lander, and built like the concept of a jetpack and early helicopters, and built parts for the space shuttle program, and like all of these things that you would never expect that happen here in Niagara.
Exactly.
And they all happen here.
If you took like a poll, like if we just walked around downtown and asked people if they knew that, they wouldn't. I would think.
And that's it.
Like you and I know because we've actually done our due diligence as of like, I mean, you started a little earlier than I did, but I kind of got on the bandwagon afterward because again, my influence were, there's nothing to do in Niagara Falls. And I was like, wait, there's a ton to do in Niagara Falls.
Yeah, it's like once you find it, this place is amazing. Like,
yeah, exactly. I love to be here, and I don't see why anyone wouldn't love to be here. It's got its problem like everywhere else got its problems. There's nothing new in Niagara Falls that somewhere else doesn't have. You know what I mean? But again, we need to get the general community back in touch with the history here, the very rich history, the artifacts. All the different like secret things that we don't talk about.
You mean the grave in DeVoe Woods?
Oh yeah, that's true. That thing, yeah.
Yeah, that thing. We don't talk about the grave in DeVoe Woods.
But again, there's all kind of like little hidden gems all over, Niagara Falls and surrounding areas that no one talks about unless you know somebody who said something, once or twice about them. And again, the general public, you don't hear about it in school. The general public doesn't know about it. It's only through word of mouth that you get these little snippets and then have to do your own research.
Exactly. And it looks like, unfortunately, Darth, our time is up.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to talk for so long.
Oh, no. That was perfect. You filled up the last of our time. Usually, Peter and I just sit here making cow noises back and forth until the clock runs out.
That's right.
Angela's sending 2 question marks about grave in DeVoe Woods. We talked, Angela, that was one of the first things we ever talked about on the show, well before you were watching. We'll have to cover it again. We'll have to cover Eliza Keg. Angela, when you run into me, I'll tell you about it. We might cover it again next week. We'll head back. We'll do a live stream. We'll do a live stream from a grave. Let's do it.
We should compile a list.
We should.
Even if it's not like necessarily like factually accurate, just like things that we've heard.
Yes.
And things that we should like look into later.
Yes. That sounds like something that tour guides do. Wait a second, that's right. That's why we're here. Well, folks, unfortunately, our time is up here. Peter, any last words?
There are never last words. Just an ongoing conversation about the world's greatest waterfall.
Righto, and this has been a really fun episode. Thank you, Darth Mounty, for joining us on today's episode. This was quite fun. Really, actually, very informative on the last half there, so that was great. So happy you came along.
Thank you.
As always, thank you for joining us. I hope to see you again next week where we have even more fun. We'll probably talk even more about Canada if Peter has his way. But for the American side of Niagara Falls and your Niagara Falls experience, I'm Nico. Have a wonderful evening.